And welcome back to Sports Talk. Doug Miles, Don Henderson with you. And right now we want to bring on our guest. We are happy to have him join us tonight. He's a baseball writer. He's covered the Detroit Tigers for 18 seasons for Booth Newspapers and covered baseball for more than 30 years for Baseball America, Bleacher Report, CBS Sports.com, ESPN.com, and Sport Magazine. He's got a new book out. It's called Numbers Don't Lie, all about the Detroit Tigers, and we're glad to welcome Danny Knobler to the show tonight. And Danny, Doug Miles and Don Henderson with you. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great.
Well, we're doing pretty well, I'll tell you. It's an interesting season for the Detroit Tigers, and I guess I'd have to start off by you were right in the midst of a big-time story when the general manager all of a sudden left, and I know he's got a lot of open doors that he can go to, but that was a little bit of a surprise to me after the trading deadline.
Yeah, the timing was a big surprise when they decided to. There were a lot. It was the last year of Dave Dombrowski's contract. Dave Dombrowski's time as general manager of the Tigers was extremely successful, but the owner of the Tigers, Mike Gillett, had always hoped that he could win a World Series sometime before he died. Mike Gillett is 86 years old, and the Tigers have come close, but they haven't yet won. And after all the time Dave Dombrowski was there have been some tension, and there was a lot of thought that this might be the last year for Dave in Detroit. But I don't think anybody thought that Mike Ilitch was going to let him go midway through the season, days after the trade deadline, days after they made the decision to kind of sell on this season and build for next year.
Doug?
He had such a great run there under Jimmy Leland, coming close in the World Series that one time, and really other seasons they thought they'd win it all, but never could quite get it done. How do the Tigers fans feel up there now with this whole situation, like you mentioned, with Dombrowski and the team pretty much just kind of coasting along this year and not doing much?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I think Tiger fans sometimes miss that the success that they've had since 2006 when they went to the World Series. And I think some of them maybe overlook or not overlook, but they're so intent on trying to win a World Series, and I can certainly understand that I think that they maybe don't enjoy as much as, I wish they would, the idea that the success that they've had, that they won the division 4 years in a row, is something no Tiger team has ever done. A lot of other teams haven't done. The Boston Red Sox, St. Louis Cardinals have never finished in first place 4 years in a row in their history, and the Tigers have done it the last 4 years. They're not going to do it this year, and they're probably, unless it doesn't look like they're going to end up making the playoffs this year. But no question, it was quite a run, and especially because of where it came from. And one of the things one of my favorite chapters of the book is about the number of players who made it from the 2003 team, lost 119 games, and were still with the Tigers in 2006 when they went to the World Series 3 years later.
Mm.
That is really amazing, and I think one of the things you just stated, I think in all sports, people just get discouraged. You win consistently, but you don't win the big one. And all of a sudden, the crowds go down a little bit, the enthusiasm goes down a little bit, and then you either win or you're just another team.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I don't think, obviously, you try to win a World Series. There's no question. Football teams start a season hoping to win the Super Bowl. College football teams hoping to win the College Football National Championship. There's no question about that. But I also think you can have a lot of success and you can have a lot of fun in years where you maybe fall a little short of that and where you still have a real good season. And we've seen it sometimes, and there's no question that fans appreciate that when a team hasn't won for a while. There was no question in Detroit that fans really appreciated that 2006 season, somewhat like fans in Kansas City appreciated last season, even though they lost in the World Series. It had been so long since they had been in the playoffs. The fact that they got there and had excitement, there was no question they appreciated that. The same way fans in the Tampa Bay area appreciated the 2008 Rays, who came out of nowhere and hadn't won for anything, hadn't had a winning season, and then they go all the way to the World Series. And fans in the 1990s appreciated those Cleveland Indians teams that went to the World Series a couple times. But I also understand that because you start every season hoping that you're going to win it all, when you have a run of success, and that run of success doesn't include a World Series win, a championship, some people feel like it's a little empty. I don't know that I feel that way, but I certainly understand why a lot of fans do.
Well, I think two of the things that surprised me, I thought when they picked up Price last year that was going to be maybe the solidifying fact to get in. And the year before, I mean, let's face it, they've got, if not the best, well, he's hurt now, but it's not the best player in the American League, certainly very close to the best player in the American League, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, you're talking about Miguel Cabrera, if not the best player, the best hitter in baseball, and one of the best we've seen in the history of the game. And you're absolutely right. Last year when they traded for David Price, there was a feeling like you put him together with Max Scherzer and with Justin Verlander and Anibal Sanchez, and you have a rotation that should take you to a World Series.
Right.
It didn't happen. They lost in the playoffs. They had a very nice second half. They had a very nice season, but they didn't win. And one of the things to remember as we watch teams right now, we watch the Toronto Blue Jays, we watch the LA Dodgers with Greinke and Kershaw, we watch the Cardinals with the success they've had this year, that the way the postseason is, especially right now with 3 rounds plus the wild card, a lot of things happen, and it's very unpredictable. One of the things I always go back to, the Philadelphia Phillies had a very nice run. Now it's over right now. The Phillies they got a decent little short span of good place in the All-Star break, but they're in a very bad season. But they had a very nice run.
No question about that.
They had a very nice run. Yeah, it started in 2007. But go ahead.
I'll preface that comment by saying I was with them for 25 years, and I was with the great years. And of course, when they lost their game with the wild one up there at the Rogers Center, never forget that game in 1993. And
I won't either. I was there for that too, and you're right. I won't ever forget that game. But the Phillies had a real nice recent run, and they won in 2008. One of the things I find interesting about that, you talk to people who were with that team, talk to Ruben Amaro, and they don't think the 2008 team was the best team in baseball that year, but they do think the 2010, 2011 team, when they had that great pitching staff, when they put Halladay together with Lee and Oswald and Cole Hamels, they thought those teams were great. They thought those teams were very well. They thought those teams were a lot better than the 2008 team, but they didn't win that year. The one year they went to the Game 5 of the division series against the Cardinals. If they hadn't lost Game 2, they might have gone all the way, but they ended up in Game 5 and they lost that 1-0 game to Chris Carpenter, one of the great postseason games there's been. It happens, and it's hard to win. It's really hard to win. There's a lot of good teams, and the short series make it very difficult. The best team often doesn't win, and that's the way it goes. And saying that the best team doesn't win doesn't mean that the teams that win aren't deserving, because this is the system, and you play well. Look, the San Francisco Giants probably haven't had the most talented team in baseball any of the last 5 years, but they've won 3 World Series in that time. Mm-hmm. That's a great credit to them, but it also tells you a lot about what playoff baseball is.
Danny Knobler joining us. The name of the book is Numbers Don't Lie, Detroit Tigers. And Danny, just kind of looking through it, it's one of those books you pick up and read a couple of chapters, and you got, of course, the great names in Tigers history going back to Hank Greenberg, and, of course, you got the Denny McLain in there, and more recent numbers. So a lot of great history to kind of fall back on, put it together, right?
Yeah, that was part of the fun of the book, was looking through the different great players and great characters in Tiger history, some of the great seasons, some of the worst seasons, more of the great ones than the bad ones. But trying to tell the best stories in Tiger history. And you're right, the idea of the book was that you can pick it up, put it down, pick it back up, and enjoy it, flip through it, find a chapter you like, find a player you always loved watching, or maybe maybe it was before your time and have heard about but don't know that much about, and can pick it up and read something about it through the fun numbers. And we associate numbers with baseball, and any team you follow, there's numbers you associate with it. And anyone who's followed the Tigers, or anyone who's followed baseball and knows about the Tigers, knows about numbers like 35 and 5. If I say 35 and 5, anybody who was around remembers that as the 1984 Tigers.
Sure.
If I say 31 wins, anybody remembers that, as you said, Denny McClain. So that's kind of the idea we had behind it, was to take those numbers and build the stories of the most interesting players and teams in Tiger history around those numbers.
What's your favorite story within the book?
I have a couple of them. I'll go through them real quickly. One is about Ty Cobb, and Ty Cobb was a lot of people thought that he was the best player in the history of baseball, certainly the best player at the time. But he lived in an era, he began his play in an era before home runs became a big deal. And when Babe Ruth came around and home runs became a big deal, Ty Cobb, they say, kind of resented it. And one day in St. Louis, he told a couple of writers from Detroit, he said, "You watch me. I'm going to go, for the only time in my career, I'm going to try to hit home runs." And he hit 3 home runs in that game and 2 in the next game, 5 in 2 games, something Babe Ruth never did. I thought that was spectacular. We had his what was it,
grandson on about a year or two ago when he wrote a book about Ty. Yeah, interesting.
Yes, he did. And then one other story, and this actually also involves Ty Cobb. And Ty Cobb was suspended. Ty Cobb went into the stands at Yankee Stadium, and then the league president said he had to suspend him. Well, the Tigers went on strike. We think of strikes as a more recent thing, but this is back in the 1920s. Ty Cobb went on strike, the Tigers went on strike because Ty Cobb was Ty Cobb wasn't always a favorite of his teammates. They felt like it was unfair, like the fan had really been abusing him, and that he was right to go into it. Anyway, they went to Philadelphia for the next game, and the owner of the Tigers said, "What am I going to do? My players are refusing to play." And he called some friends in Philadelphia, and they came up with a group of a crazy group, really a scab group, but a group of mostly college kids, some coaches, some other people. Well, the guy who played center field, which is Ty Cobb's spot, the way the story goes, when he got home, his wife said, "What are you doing taking Ty Cobb's place?" and hit him over the head with a frying pan. That's the way the story goes. I can't verify that one, but that is the story.
It sounds true.
The kid who pitched that day wasn't even a college baseball player. He was the student manager of the team. And the reason he was the pitcher, Aloysius Trower, later a priest, the reason he was the pitcher that day was because when he was asked to organize the team, and the pitcher was going to get paid more than everybody else. So he said, "Okay, I'll pitch." And he gave up 26 runs to the Philadelphia A's.
Oh,
Now,
boy.
the Philadelphia A's at the time were a very good team. It would be the equivalent of taking a group, maybe just a group off the street and going in to play against the St. Louis Cardinals right now.
Right.
and that's what they did. But they did that one game. Anyway, they settled the strike right after that, but they played the one game.
Well, people don't realize that, quite honestly, the 27 Yankees everybody talks about 28, 29. But really, the Philadelphia Athletics were just as good as the 27, 28, 29 New York Yankees. They didn't win it all, but they were great teams.
If they hadn't had to sell off all their players, and
right.
Actually, one of those ended up being a big part of Tiger history, Mickey Cochran, was sold off by the Philadelphia A's. The Tigers got him. The owner of the Tigers attendance had gone down. This was during the Depression, and he was looking for a celebrity manager. Originally, he wanted to hire Babe Ruth, but he wasn't able to do that. He ends up buying Mickey Cochran from the Philadelphia A's because Connie Mack was trying. He was doing what we've later seen happen with the Tampa and Oakland, selling off his players.
Right.
And so you have those great players. And Cochran became the Tigers manager, and in some ways the most successful manager in Tigers history. But there's some others. Let me get one quick number out there. One of my favorite other ones was Carlos Guillen hitting a walk-off home run at 3:30 in the morning.
Well, Danny,
I'll tell you what,
go ahead, Don.
Mr. Mack was one of the more interesting characters in all of baseball, and I worked with Jimmy Dykes for a number of years, and Jimmy came up to the broadcast booth for a while, and he was just a tremendous guy, a tremendous baseball guy. But you're right, Mr. Mack just never had the money.
No, and it's too bad because you're right. He had outstanding teams. He had a way of coming up with talented players. He just didn't have a way of keeping them.
Danny Knobler, the name of the book is Numbers Don't Lie, Detroit Tigers, and it's published by our friends over at Triumph Books, so you can get that book there at triumphbooks.com. Danny, pleasure talking to you. I'm glad we could work it out this week. Apologize for last week, the mix-up, but glad to have you on. Hopefully we can do it again.
No problem. I'm glad it worked out.
Well, great success with the book. I know people are really going to enjoy it. I know there's got to be a lot of stuff about LK line and a lot of other things in there that we didn't touch on. But,
a couple of chapters on Al. Al's one of my favorite people in the game.
Oh, it has to be. Well, thank you very, very much for your time, effort, and energy, and I'll look forward when Doug finishes. I'll look forward to reading the book.
Okay.